Hi everyone, it's Cathy Hohmeyer, and I actually think we're having a few technical difficulties here. I'm really excited to bring in Dr. Stephen Hussey today, but it doesn't seem like we're connecting properly, and I'm not sure what end it is on. So I may log out and in again, but it looks like we might have difficulties tonight. So, and I really want to bring Dr. Hussey down, and I'm not sure. I'm gonna hide him again. We had another hold with this. It doesn't seem to be connecting, so we're gonna have to figure out the issues and hopefully reschedule. I'm going to just copy the link again for him and try and connect with him again. We'll see what happens. And see what happens. And if not, then I may reschedule. We started another whole show. And yeah, it looks like he's logged in again. Yeah, I know. I see you. Thank you. I can't bring in my guest. It says that he's in, but he can't. Thank you for being here. But it says that he can't come in. And I see Christy there. I don't know if you've had this happen before, Christy. I have not. So I don't know what to tell him, honestly. So I may have to, I'm just going to put this up. I'm trying to bring in my guest. And we aren't having luck. So I'm not sure what to tell him. We started another whole show. We both logged in again, and nothing's happening here to bring him in. I'm just messaging him too. He can go out and come back in. He did once. Just tell him to come back in one more time, and we'll see what happens. I don't think it's on my end because you guys are seeing me, and but it says, the weird thing is it says that he is logged in. Like I see his name come up, but there's no camera there, and he says he can see himself on the bottom screen. So I'm not sure why it's not coming up to the top. I got this. It doesn't look like it so far, but we're working on it. Have a little bit of energy there, guys, and bring him. I don't know what to tell him if there's settings that are missing on his end, because I can see his name but not his camera. Thank you, Teresa. So we may have to reschedule and may just do a Chrome browser. Okay. I see him go. It's like flashing now. Crazy. Yeah, okay. Let me copy that, Christy. Thank you. And I'll put that in his chat. If something's flashing now, so the energy's working anyway. But we may have to. Yeah, it's literally flashing on the. Oh, can you see me flashing? That's him kind of trying to come in and out or something. It's kind of crazy. Hey, Jamie. So we may have to kind of correct connections with him, and I can't actually bring him down from the show either. The weird thing was that when we did the other when I made the other broadcast, it wasn't counting down either, even though it looks like we're here. So as you can see, when I show him, nothing's there, even though he says he's in. So we may have to figure this out on our end, and then, yeah, he says he's seeing his, or at least he said before that he saw his camera on the bottom right. So maybe it's just not coming through that other way. I don't know. So we may have to, I thank you so much for chiming in. I'm really excited to talk to them. We had a brief chat before about heart health, and I'm really excited to talk to him, but it's just not working, guys. So we may have to, I'll stay on just a little bit, and we'll do a little bit of heart recap. I'm just going to see, he may be, like I said, he's with Christy's message, he may be trying that again or something. I don't know. He hasn't messaged me back. So while he's trying to log in, we'll see if we connect. And I think we have time afterwards anyway. But I'm actually wearing my green because, right, green is all heart and heart chakra. And actually, shamrock green is actually heart, according to our light wave. And it seems like he's logged out again or something. And as a friend, I didn't start this. I just did an interview. Yeah, we both did sign off and back again. I may go back to the other our other broadcast, maybe. See, there's his name again, and then it flashes off. So we may just have to figure this out between he and I, because it's flashing. Yep. Oh, there he is! Yay!
Hey,
Hey, we got you. Hi there.
How are you?
Oh, good, good, good. Yay, guys, you did it. They sent lots of energy, kept us safe, and here we are. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, great. We figured it out. Thank you, Christy, for the recommendations. I'm not sure exactly what worked, but we've got it. Thank you very much. Yay. So I'll just kind of start with that. Most people know that I am Cathy Hohmeyer. We do the Nourishing Your Multidimensional Body. And I'm actually pretty proud of myself today. Even on the other broadcast that I started, I was pretty proud of myself. I actually picked tons and tons of wild violets, and this is wild violet vinegar. And I even made, from the leaves, I actually made pesto. So I was pretty proud of myself today doing my wild foraging. So that's my nutritional energetics for the day. Yeah, Teresa says, whoop whoop, hello, Stephen. So yes, this is Dr. Stephen Hussey, and he does heart health. So I'm really, let me take our names down here. I'll keep yours up. They know who I am for the most part. I have a little kind of background here, not as much as I had on the other one, but we can do that. Yes, Teresa, thank you so much. So Teresa says hello. And let's see, we've got Jake, hello, yay. Yep, Jamie, thank you for helping. You're a big help on these shows, thank you. And Val says hello, and Chris is here. And Christy, thank you so much. You've got Jake and let's see so far. Yeah, if you're signing in, say hello. Tell us know where you're from. I love to know where you're from. I, of course, and we've got somebody saying good morning. So where are you from, Elizabeth? I'm in the Adirondack Mountains. I think most people know that. And it's been awesome here. And Stephen, where are you? You're in East Coast, right? You're down in
I'm in Roanoke, Virginia, so right in the middle of the Appalachians.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and let us know all about heart health. I told people I have my green on, and green chakra, the heart chakra is all about green, and in the light wave that I offer, a lot of people know what I do. With the light wave, shamrock green is the color of the heart. So in terms of a few little energetics there, we've got Venus from Nevada. Hello, how are you? Cindy from Nevada, yay. Okay, so Stephen, why don't you give us your background? I know you were one of those who had to figure things out by yourself. So go ahead and let us know all about where you came from.
So well, today I'm a chiropractor and a functional medicine practitioner. But I started out, at a very young age, having lots of health issues, everything from asthma to allergies to chronic hives, have irritable bowel syndrome, all these things, these inflammatory type things, since I was a kid. And I guess that, we were very dependent on Western medicine, and my parents and we looked to them for answers, and never really got them. And I remember when I was a kid, when I was going to the doctor all the time, it felt like seeing posters in the doctor's offices saying, if you're diabetic, which I eventually became diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune attack of my pancreas, and those cells have been destroyed. And I remember seeing posters in there saying, if you're diabetic, you have 2 to 4 increased risk of heart disease. You have poor wound healing, your eyes will go bad, all this kind of stuff. So I think it was kind of ingrained in me when I was a child that I was going to get these things. And so as I grew older and smarter and got a medical education and started looking for answers, I've really tried to gather as much information about the heart and what causes heart disease, the true causes of heart disease, because I really wanted to prevent that, because there was this fear placed in me that was going to happen. And then I think I think I was around 15, maybe 16, when my grandfather had a stroke, and then had heart issues, as well as diagnosed with cancer at the young age of 65. Well, I think he was diagnosed before that, but he died at 65. And so all these things kind of pushed me to figure out what I could do to prevent these things. And the answers that I found were completely different than what I was being told, as far as, what my doctors and Western medicine, and even, the traditional medical school chiropractic training that I got, is very different than what it was telling me. So I'm trying to share those ideas, those big concepts, and the real things we should be worried about when it comes to heart health, because it has nothing to do with cholesterol and saturated fat and those types of things. So
right. And you and I have kind of a common, I think one at least common, we haven't talked a whole lot, in the Weston Price Foundation, and basically working with traditional foods and nutrient dense foods and all that sort of thing.
Correct.
So yeah, and so is that a part of your whole package?
Yeah. So I'm actually in the process right now of I'm putting up a blog series of why an animal-based diet or a diet with animal foods in it is actually best for heart disease and heart attacks. And so I've only posted one of the series of 5 that I'm going to post so far. But and that's, what Weston Price found is that these people who, he was looking at their teeth, but he also found they had no heart disease or cancer or things like that. But what he found is that they every single group of these people that he was studying had a coveted source of animal fat or fat in general, of saturated fat. And he, isolated those fat soluble vitamins, and he found that that's what was giving them health. He called, vitamin K activator X, which we know now as vitamin K. But he found that was the similarity in all these people, is that they went out of their way to find this heart healthy fat, and this just healthy fat in general. So whether it was the fish that people had, or whether it was, he talks about the people, and I think it's Switzerland, who they made sure the cows ate the grass on the side of the mountain that part of the year, so that they got they can make the butter from the milk they got from that. He talked about people eating cod livers and cod liver oil, and all these different things, but they all found some source of this animal fat that they could use to keep them healthy. And so that's definitely, that's one of the 3 pillars that I say people need to pay attention to avoid heart disease. Being fat burning and eating high amounts of fat is one of those pillars. So
I was just putting up too, if anyone has questions, they can post them, so eventually we can take a look as well. So Stephen, so you were a chiropractor, and you're chiropractor and nutritionist, right?
Yeah, I have a master's degree in functional medicine and nutrition.
And you look at heart because that was something that was very apparent to you, that, like you said, you were afraid that might happen to you, or so that's something you really looked into. So you work with patients with probably old and young. We've talked really briefly, And I'm always concerned with the young kids who have such high anxiety and heart palpitations and all that sort of thing. So can you like briefly speak to kind of both ends of the age spectrum that you've worked with? Or is does it turn out the same type of thing that you work with?
Both ends of the what spectrum? What'd you say?
Well, like ages, like, you know, the young folks with the anxiety and the heart, but there's older people who, you know, have, you know, heart issues and heart surgery, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I think it would be useful if we back up and I kind of lay out those three pillars that I think make heart health, and then we can take those three pillars and I can apply them to different age groups for sure.
Okay.
So the first one is that, like we kind of mentioned, is that our heart prefers to burn fat for fuel. And it wants to do that, you know, fat, or it could do ketones. So fatty acid oxidation, or when you add ketones to that, there's a 28% increase in efficiency of the heart. And so it's so important that it does this, that your body actually takes the fat that you eat and packages it in a chylomicron, which is a kind of a fat transport molecule. And that chylomicron goes from the gut straight to the lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system drains right into the veins that go directly into your heart. And so the heart gets this preferential source of fat. And so your body's doing everything that it can to make sure that if we do become glucose burning, that the heart is the last thing to do that. That it always has a good source of fat. Whether you're eating tons of carbohydrates, the fat that you eat gets kind of packaged and put right to the heart. And so the reason that is because the heart is a muscle, obviously, and our muscles, you know, like our skeletal muscles, they can burn glucose. They actually store glucose in the form of glycogen. And so if we need to sprint away from something and work really fast and really hard, then they can burn glucose. So that's a quicker fuel source, but they would like to burn fat as well. But our heart's not the same as those skeletal muscles. It wants to burn fat all the time. And if it's forced to burn glucose, we can get a buildup of lactic acid. So lactic acid is the kind of the muscle burn that you feel when you go for a run. And so if we get lactic acid buildup in our muscles, we can just stop running and the lactic acid gets pumped out. But if we start to rely on glucose, burn glucose, and then rely on glucose sugar in our heart, then we get that buildup of lactic acid, and the heart just it can't just stop. And so the buildup of lactic acid, people will get, you know, angina, they'll get chest pain because the lactic acid building up in the heart. But if that happens chronically, and then we get like a stress response and things like that, then that lactic acid buildup can actually cause damage to the heart, or it can cause calcium to not be able to enter the heart cells, which is calcium is how the cells contract. And then that can cause tissue damage if the cells can't contract because they lose blood supply because of that lactic acid builds up and changes the pressure in the heart cells. So that's the first thing, is that the heart prefers to burn fat. And if it's forced to burn glucose, problems can happen. The second pillar is we want autonomic nervous system balance. So we all have this autonomic nervous system that's basically designed to help us interpret our environment and determine if we're in a stressful environment or a threatening environment or a safe one. And I mean, there's a long evolutionary history of that autonomic nervous system where, you know, it used to be, you know, reptiles and things that came before reptiles actually have this one pathway of this autonomic nervous system in the vagus nerve. And when they got overstimulated or stressed out, or they were in a threatening situation, like something was trying to kill it, it was actually advantageous for them to play dead. And so that when that nerve got overstimulated, it would do things like slow their metabolism, slow their heart rate, slow their breathing, to the point where it looked like they were dead. And that was an evolutionarily advantageous behavior for them because they wouldn't be here if it wasn't. But when we see, that was like reptiles and before reptiles. And then in some reptiles, we see we start to see a divergence of this nerve. We see the old pathway that was in reptiles, and then we see this new pathway that we see fully developed in mammals. And the reason that we needed it was because mammals are very metabolically active. And if we got the stress response and our body tried to shut down like it was doing in these reptiles, then our organs would die, because our organs need to be metabolically burning things at a much higher rate than these reptiles were. So we developed this second pathway so that we could have a stress response and not have organs shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was useful, obviously. However, if we, fast forward and look at what environment humans have put ourselves in today, it's that we're surrounded by a lot of unnatural stressors. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we have this high level of stress all day long, or we're the only species on the planet that can literally think our way into a stress response, or we
Mm-hmm.
could see something happen to somebody else and then fear that it's going to happen to us and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So we can kind of keep ourselves in the stress response, even though our mind is overriding it, and we're not having we're not exhibiting life-threatening behavior. Our body's still having like a physiologic life-threatening response to it. And so that can create this imbalance in this autonomic nervous system. And so this newly evolved pathway of the vagus nerve can actually get shut down. And so, these days people talk a lot about vagal nerve tone and nourishing your vagus nerve and things like that. What they're trying to do is they're trying to rebalance this autonomic nervous system. And so if we shut down that pathway in the vagus nerve too much, or we lose the function of it, we actually revert back to that, or we can revert back to that old evolved pathway that's still there, which is organ shutdown, or metabolic shutdown, which
Mm-hmm.
sounds a lot like a heart attack to me. So that's the second pillar, is this autonomic nervous system imbalance. And so these three pillars, when kind of the stars align and these things happen all at once, we end up with a heart attack. But the third one is oxidative stress. So if we're looking at oxidative stress, is basically when you have an excess of what are called free radicals in your body. And so if you're, we make free radicals just by the process of making energy for our body. It's just kind of like when a car burns fuel, it makes an exhaust, it makes a waste product. It's just kind of necessary, it has to happen. And we have built-in mechanisms that allow us to get rid of those free radicals. However, when we burn carbohydrates, research has shown that burning carbohydrates results in an excess free radicals, which can create oxidative stress. There are many, many toxins in our environment that we were not exposed to throughout our evolution. Heavy metals, all the phthalates, and all the synthetic chemicals that we've made as humans. All that stuff can contribute to oxidative stress, which means we have too many free radicals, and our body can't take care of the rest of them. And the most interesting thing about that, combined or thinking about it in the aspect of heart disease, is that it can destroy. And this is a whole nother topic. It can destroy the lining of the artery, which is the fourth phase water that's protecting the lining of the artery.
Mm-hmm.
It can destroy that, and then therefore destroy or start to damage the artery. And then our body says, okay, we got to repair this before something bad happens, and it puts cholesterol into the side of the artery.
Mm-hmm.
And so, cholesterol is not the cause of atherosclerosis. It's really this oxidative stress that's forcing the body to do something to repair the artery. And so it uses cholesterol and minerals and things like that to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But the other aspect of it is that when we destroy the lining of the artery, we get a decrease in the amount of nitric oxide, which is produced in the cells that line the artery. And when we get a decreased amount of nitric oxide, the signal that I was talking about, the aspect of the autonomic nervous system that sends the relax or rest and digest signal to the heart cells, is allowed into the heart cells via nitric oxide. And so if we have this excess oxidative stress, it can deplete nitric oxide, and then we don't get that balanced signaling of the autonomic nervous system to our heart, and that can be problematic. So those are the three pillars, and we can kind of go back and outline how imbalance in those three things causes a heart attack. But you had asked about, across age groups, and I think that, in younger people, we're seeing a lot of imbalance in this autonomic nervous system. I think that there is a lot demanded of our young people these days, and I think that I'm recalling a study that I saw that showed that, I can't remember, it was in younger people. I think it was like people below 40 or below 30 or something like that, that if they had two significant drops in income during their life, in their adult life, that I can't remember the exact statistics, but they had a much higher increased risk of heart disease and heart attacks, which
Mm-hmm.
makes sense to me because, money is this thing that we're all dependent on because we need it. Our society says we need it in order to get the things that allow us to survive, all of our resources that we need to survive. And so that's very stressful to be dependent on this one thing and have to go to great lengths, to get that one thing. And so I think that when we look at the amount of student loan debt that younger people are having these days, and I'm in that category as well. I have a massive amount of student loan debt. We look at all that stuff, and we look at the pressure that society is putting on everyone, really, but our younger generation. That's why we're seeing things. I mean, I was just contacted the other day by someone who on Instagram who told me that one of their best friends was 20 years old and had a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's a result of this increased stress, along with the other two pillars, the poor diet and oxidative stress. But then,
Mm-hmm.
as far as in the elderly, there's research that shows that the older you get, the more likely you are to have a heart attack. And I think that one mechanism at play here is social isolation is one of the biggest drivers of imbalance in our autonomic nervous system. As far as our, we are community driven beings. We're social beings, us humans, and I think that for a very, very long time in human history, elders were contributing to the success of the species because they had this wisdom and knowledge about life and about survival that they passed on to younger generations. And now, with the internet and all these different uh, avenues of getting knowledge, we're less dependent on those elders passing on that wisdom and knowledge. Plus,
Mm-hmm.
life for an elderly person today, when they were 15, is completely different because of how quickly things are changing, how fast technology is changing the world we live in. And so sometimes, or lots of times, that wisdom that they do have doesn't even apply anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
now we have this whole generation of elder people who are shipped off to nursing homes and almost like,
Mm-hmm.
um, dare I say it, like a burden to society and things like that, and they have to be
Mm-hmm.
taken care of because they also um, are having poor health lots of the time. And so that can be very stressful. And so to me, that's a big correlation as to why we see higher heart attack events in the elderly um, because they just feel socially isolated, or they feel like they're a burden to their family or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the biggest drivers of an autonomic nervous system imbalance. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there was a question early on that said, "Can stress cause heart attacks or heart problems?" So yeah, stress is kind of a loaded word, but I think certainly answered that.
but
In
interesting,
another
there was a really interesting study that showed, there's a few of them. Let me see if I can get it straight here. That showed that, so they surveyed a bunch of people and they asked them how much stress or how many stressful events they've had in their life or how stressed they felt. And they said, and then they also asked them if they felt that stress was detrimental to their health. And so then they looked at, the lifetime of these people and the mortality rates and things like that to see who died or who had chronic issues and things like that. And the people who reported high amounts of stress definitely had a higher correlation of health issues or dying sooner.
Mm-hmm.
However, that was only true if those people also thought that stress was detrimental to their health. So the
Mm-hmm.
people who were stressed or had a lot of stress in their life, what they thought of as stress, but didn't feel that it was detrimental to their health, had no correlation.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
it's kind of like we can have all the stress in our life, but if we don't feel that it's detrimental, then we mitigate that damage.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to before I forget is your for people to contact you, Stephen. I just
Yeah.
want to put that up in the middle here in case I don't. So you have a website, right?
Yeah, my website is resourceyourhealth.com. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and it's just Dr. Stephen Hussey, Dr. Stephen Hussey. People can contact me on those things. My email is Stephen with a PH at resourceyourhealth.com, so people can contact me that way as well.
We can put this in the comments afterwards too, but I just want to make sure that people know how to get in touch with you too. So, Stephen, so do you want to go back to the pillars, or do you want to say, okay, if somebody contacted you with health issues, or heart issues, how you would approach that, or what do you feel is more important?
So yeah, I mean, if someone, I mean, people contact me a lot asking for these kinds of things. So when they do that, I mean, the initial thing, what we do is we sit down and we have a kind of a 15-minute call to make sure this is a good fit. I don't want to waste anybody's time or money. I want people to be ready to make change because that's what it's going to take. But then when it's decided that it is a good fit, then we set up a longer kind of initial consultation or initial visit kind of thing. I mean, I work with people in my office, but it's very chiropractic, musculoskeletal type there. On online coaching, I'm dealing mainly with heart and autoimmune stuff. And so then we do that kind of long, like 2-hour session where I'm learning about the person and figuring out what's going to be the best approach. And then in my health coaching, like it's a 4-month program, and it's really driven to teaching people what they need to do, what they need to track and measure as far as heart disease goes and the risk for heart attack, because this is all about prevention here. And people are shocked to know that I don't really recommend measuring cholesterol or tracking that number. I don't think it's the most important thing to be tracking when it comes to heart disease, and research has backed that up more than I could imagine. But I really want to teach them the 3 or 4 things that are best to be tracking to ensure that they're not going to have a heart attack or heart disease. And then I coach them how to get once they figure out how to track these things, I coach them how to live their life so that they get good numbers from these things that they're tracking. So that's kind of how my health coaching works.
Cool. So tracking particular things, you have your own things that you think are important to track that might be different than a little bit other. And hi, Kayla. Somebody else is saying hello. Yeah, Donna was saying, what do you think of the acceptable total cholesterol level? So you already kind of answered that question as well. And folks, if we miss your question in reading off, because sometimes I miss it going up and down, we'll try and answer those in the comments as well. Okay. If I miss kind of posting this while we're talking here. So we've got folks, let's see, Lisa, I'm not even sure I know what that is. So can you see that, Stephen? Can you see when they come up?
Yeah, I see them over here.
I wasn't sure if you could see the comments when I post them.
I can definitely address the total cholesterol question.
Okay.
So with cholesterol, I mean, it's not really a marker of whether you're going to have a heart attack or not. So if we're looking at cholesterol numbers, like I say, cholesterol is not the cause of heart attacks. It's oxidative stress. It's inflammation in your body that's driving these, and that cholesterol is kind of this innocent bystander that gets framed. But if we want to talk about cholesterol levels and what we look for, so I think an optimal total cholesterol level is 215 or something like that, which people say, oh, that's high. Well, cholesterol is an essential molecule, and it's actually, I mean, I can show you research that says that people with higher cholesterol live longer, especially among the elderly. And so lots of times with the diet that I recommend, we do see elevated cholesterol, or we see elevated LDL cholesterol. And that is only a problem if you have elevated markers of inflammation, or we have markers of insulin resistance that are elevated, or elevated triglycerides as well. So the ideal panel for me would look like total cholesterol of like 215. We'd want to see LDL could be elevated, it could be severely elevated, but as long as the HDL is high and the triglycerides are low, and we don't have elevated markers of like C-reactive protein, like inflammation, or we don't have elevated markers of insulin resistance, like the HOMA score or A1C or just fasting glucose. If those things are fine, then your cholesterol could go. I mean, your LDL cholesterol could go as high as it wanted to, because there's a certain group of people that when they eat a high fat diet like this, they're called lean mass hyper responders. That's what Dave Feldman has kind of labeled them. And they're people that will get this drive up of LDL cholesterol. But again, that's only an issue if we have inflammation. And why that's an issue is because, so LDL is the one that everybody's so obsessed with, because that's the smallest particle that has the ability to kind of penetrate the lining of the artery more readily. And so it's the one that gets deposited if the body decides it needs to be deposited there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that only happens if we have high levels of inflammation and oxidative stress that destroy the fourth phase water lining of that's protecting the artery. And once that's destroyed, then that LDL, or that the oxidative stress, can destroy the lining of the artery, and then the LDL is just there, and the body's like, oh, we got to use something to kind of patch this up, or use it as spackle, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gets deposited there. So cholesterol, I think, is that cholesterol panel that people look at and are so obsessed with, I think is kind of barking up the wrong tree when we're looking at what we should track to see if we're at risk for a heart attack or heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they can be useful to look at in the sense that I can see how inflamed things are. Like if people have high LDL, it can be an indication that they have inflammation. But we could just measure the inflammation. We could just measure C-reactive protein or lots of inflammatory cytokines. We can measure those in the blood and see if there's actual inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that I tell people to test, or that I kind of coach them to test, and I try and pick ways that they can do it in their own home so they can track it themselves, are ketones, whether we're measuring in the urine or the blood. You can buy a little monitor that you can track ketones in the blood to make sure that you are fat burning, because then you'll have some ketones there.
Mm-hmm.
It's because if you are, your heart is burning fat, which we prefer.
Okay.
We want to measure nitric oxide, which you can do saliva, but you can also do more invasive blood tests measuring nitric oxide and markers of oxidative stress. And then the third one is heart rate variability. We want to be looking at that because that is from what I've seen, the best indicator of if you have balance in your autonomic nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
How healthy is your stress response, or how out of balance is it?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the three things, and we can, like I said, people can track them in their homes, and that's very useful because then they can, on a day-to-day basis, or depending on how much they want to test, they
Mm-hmm.
can do that and make sure and they can also see, like, instead of having to wait to go to the doctor, they can see how the diet they ate yesterday is affecting things today.
Mm-hmm.
And they can see how, let's say you had a very unrestful night of sleep, you can see how that affects your heart rate variability the next day. So it's just very interesting to see those things. And I feel like it's also very motivational for people, because now they're kind of holding themselves accountable, because they're trying to get these numbers, and they know they're going to have to show them to me. So, and they know that I'm gonna ask them what they've been doing if they're not where we want them to be or going the direction we want to be. So, I find that leads to higher rates of success for sure. People having these tools in their home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find that it's super refreshing to know that they can work with somebody who looks at them holistically. Just sees what they do during the day, and then you have something that you can measure at home to monitor yourself and be involved in your own care instead of just being, medications or whatever else that may or may not be necessary. But that's really awesome. Stephen, want to tell us about your book?
Yeah, so I've written 2 books. One is just an ebook that's pretty short. It's about the heart, very specific about the heart, and it kind of outlines my theories about the heart, but also the direct events that lead up to heart attacks. And then my other book, my longer book, which is it's a ebook, it's a print book, and it's an audio book. It's called The Health Evolution. And so this is more of my big picture explanation of why we have chronic disease in general. And so I talk some about the heart in that book, but it's really the things that I came across in my life that answered questions for me that I had, like why my health was so poor, but why we have this health epidemic as a
Mm-hmm.
society. But I started out writing that book, talking about health and how to achieve the best health. But I ended up also writing a book about how our health and the planet's health is one and the same,
Mm-hmm.
and how the things that create health in a human are the same things that create health for the planet. And I truly believe that if we as a society would, not to give the book away or anything, but if we as a society would prioritize our own health and do things that would create health in us individually, it would be better for the planet. And at first it may create, more problems than it would fix, but they would be problems that I think, if we solve them, would result in a sustainable planet. So I kind of draw all that together, and writing the book kind of led me down that path. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. And we'll put those links. Maybe we can put links after the broadcast. We can put links in so that people can click on to find your book and make sure they find you on Facebook and all that sort of thing as well. Okay. Well, I know we got a late start, but I think we're probably out of time. I don't think I have anybody starting right away on the Akashic Academy. I think tapping comes later. The show on tapping comes later, but I think we have a little bit of time. Is there anything you think we missed, Stephen, that you want to tell folks about in terms of any markers or how to contact you or something important? I mean, there's also the question of whether the heart is a pump or not.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah, so I was thinking that, and that's a long conversation, but the gist of it is, I don't think the heart is a pump, or at least not the pressure propulsion pump that I was taught in medical school that it is.
Right.
I mean, if you look at it as a pressure propulsion pump, it's very inefficient. And if you think about it logically, there's enough blood vessels in my body that if we laid them out, in line with each other, they would go around the earth like 4 times. And so to think that my heart, that little thing in my chest here, could pump forcefully enough to move fluid all the way around the earth 4 times. And even though that, that's not how they're lined up in my body, they're right here, they're not around the earth. Especially since in the capillary beds, it's more like a swamp. It's not like this tube that's flowing. It kind of breaks up and goes into a swamp, and then it goes back into the veins. And the blood actually stops down there. So if I wanted to pump water up a hill, I wouldn't put the pump at the top of the hill, pump it down the hill, and then try and pump it back up the hill, which is what we expect the heart to be doing. So there's just the physics of the whole system doesn't work. And if we look at, and there's people who have examined this, cardiovascular researchers who have examined the efficiency of the pump, so of the heart as a pump. And so they looked at the energy expelled in heart cells or used in heart cells, and they say based on this energy we should get this much force, and we don't get anywhere close to that. So when they looked at the efficiency, they said that as a pressure propulsion pump, the heart's about 15% efficient, which there's no way that would have lasted evolutionarily if that was the efficiency of the pump and it was a pressure propulsion pump. But then there's 2 questions. What is the heart? What's its purpose? And then how does the blood move? So the blood actually moves because there's this buildup of 4th phase water. Like half of your blood is water. And it forms this layer of what's called 4th phase water because water can hold energy. It forms that around the interior of the artery. And when it does that, it creates a very negative area in the 4th phase water, and then the blood becomes a very positive area, and that creates an energy gradient that creates propulsion. And if people are interested in this, Dr. Gerald Pollack has done a lot of interesting work with this in his book, The 4th Phase of Water. We'll answer all your questions about this, and show you how water can move without any sort of force acting upon it, just by the nature of the physics and the energy that the water can hold. And so that's how blood is moving. And then, not that the heart doesn't create some force. I mean, it creates a little bit, but mainly the water is moving through this 4th phase water mechanism. But the other aspect of it is that what is the heart then? And so if the movement of the blood in our body is dependent on the water in the blood being charged, holding charge so that it can create this force fed water and do this, we have to look at how that water is charged. And the water is charged by infrared light or radiant light. So from the sun, that's why infrared saunas work so well. It could be by contact with the earth. So grounding, that kind of stuff will build fourth phase water in your body, but also vortexing, which is swirling of water. So like if people have seen like in a stream, if water is flowing past a rock, on the other side of the rock, it kind of swirls. That's vortexing. And if we look at what happens to the blood as it travels through the heart, it's being vortexed in multiple places. And so the reason vortexing creates structured water is because it increases the contact that the water has with oxygen. And so I think that it's no mistake that our vortexing organ, the heart, is placed right next to our oxygen supplying organ, the lungs, and that the water goes from the heart to the lungs and back to the heart. So it gets vortexed, it goes and gets oxygen, comes back and gets vortexed again, and then goes out into the blood supply. So our heart is mainly a vortex, but then the other thing the heart does is that it also maintains the pressure in the system. Because if I start to go for a run, all of my blood is going to want to go toward my muscles and to supply it so that I can keep running. And so if the heart wasn't there to kind of stop my blood from flowing, all of it toward the arteries, then the venous side of the equation would collapse because all of it was over there. So when the blood starts flowing on its own, because of what fourth phase water does for us, if it was flowing too forcefully to the arterial side, there'd be nothing left in the veins, but the heart is there to stop it. It's there to slow it down. And there's been really interesting research that shows that like high level athletes, like soccer players and marathon runners, have increased heart muscle, not because they're using their heart so much. And I mean, they can be, and it's actually can be damaging to heart muscle, but it's that big because it needs to be more effective at stopping the flow of blood. And that's one of the main jobs of the heart, to vortex things and then to stop or slow the flow of blood so that we can maintain pressure in the whole system. Because it doesn't make sense if you think about it. Like if the blood's already flowing, why would I, like if we had a river that was already flowing and we put a pressure propulsion pump in the middle of the river, it wouldn't need to be there because a pressure propulsion pump takes water that's standing still, sucks it in, and forcefully pumps it out somewhere else. So putting one of those in the middle of a flowing river wouldn't make sense, and it would probably get in the way. It would probably slow the flow of the river. It's like, well, that's exactly what we want the heart to do. We want it to slow that flow of blood in times when it needs to, so that we don't get collapse of the system, the pressure in the system.
Super interesting. Yeah, I've looked into heart's not a pump. I've heard that for a number of years, but the vortexing. I mean, you hear about that in other places, but not the heart. Right. So that's really super cool.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. The heart is a very effective vortexer. Just the spiral orientation of the heart muscle and how it is. Like, so when it contracts, it spins like this. It's vortexing as it spins. As the blood flows through a valve, it vortexes on the other side. And Da Vinci was actually the first one to notice that, which is impressive because that was the 1500s. Yeah, he was way far ahead of everybody. Yeah, and even when the blood's flowing back from the inferior and superior vena cava, it flows past and it kind of vortexes and kind of spins like this. It doesn't hit each other. It kind of spins it like this, so it vortexes it a little bit. So yeah, it's just very, very interesting. The hemodynamics and the physics of the heart is super fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I was trained as an occupational therapist, so I went through anatomy and physiology, but none of that stuff at all was in there. And people are asking why is modern medicine and doctors so far behind in understanding the cholesterol and the statins. So I think that's a loaded question too.
And that's it's money. I mean, it's if you read, there's a really good book, how statins really lower cholesterol and kill you one cell at a time. But that in that book, they go into detail how statins were approved and how it was very bad science and how it was pushed along through industry. Pharmaceutical industries will do whatever they can to get a drug approved either wrongfully or sooner than it should be, things like that, because that's their product. They want to sell it. And back in the 1950s, Ansel Keys, he did his 6 countries study where he looked at data from 6 different countries, and he saw, like, he compared how much animal fat and cholesterol these countries ate and how much heart disease they had, and he concluded that there was a correlation between cholesterol and heart disease, or dietary cholesterol and saturated fat and heart disease. But the interesting thing that he did was that there was data available from 22 countries at the time, and he picked the 6 that he thought would give him the correlation. And so that's what he got. And so later, maybe 2-3 years later, a New York City statistician who worked for the state of New York and a UC Berkeley statistician redid his study and used, like, exactly the way he did it, and used data from all 22 countries and found there was no correlation. But because I think Ansel Keys had backing from the food industry, like sugar and grain industry, that kind of stuff, and because he was just a charismatic guy, I think that theory stuck. And so then it became this obsession of how can we make a product. So everybody was convinced that cholesterol was bad for us. So naturally, pharmaceutical companies were like, well, how can we make a product that helps people lower cholesterol? And then, since the pharmaceutical companies fund the medical schools, then that becomes the curriculum. And so, and since getting a medical degree oftentimes comes with an ego, when you're told that something that you think to be true, like cholesterol causes heart disease, is not true, but you're the one with the medical degree, then you're less likely to change your mind or even be open to other things. And so it's just a cycle that we're stuck in. I think Upton Sinclair, he said, it's very difficult to get a man to understand something if his salary depends on him not understanding it. And that's exactly what's happening with medical doctors, with pharmaceutical companies. Like, you're not going to get them to understand something that is going to sacrifice their income, which is what they use to support their families.
Sure.
I honestly believe that it's not some evil thing. It's not a conspiracy. I mean, maybe there's some aspect of that, but I think that it's just, these people stuck in this system that's so dependent on this capitalist society, that this is just what happens. But the beautiful thing about that is that we as consumers can change that. If enough of us want something different, if we demand something better than Western medicine, then Western medicine will change, because it has to survive. If we stop putting money into that system, then it won't have to change. And I'm seeing it already. I mean, the big hospital system here where I am, Carillion, they're opening up, Carillion Wellness, and they're trying to encourage people to eat better. I mean, the recommendations may be wrong, but that wasn't even a thing that they had to do before. Now they're being forced to do it. So it is happening.
Yeah, it is. And with folks like you to look at, like, as an occupational therapist, when I worked in either the hospitals or the schools, I was like, well, you have to look at everything. It's just not so. So I think, I kind of went through, my age phase, and you guys are here, thank goodness, going through that and adding a lot more interesting information that wasn't out there, and making people, like, even listening today, going, oh, maybe there's another way to look at this. What else should we be looking at? So somebody says, wonderful discussion, please post it, post your book. So we want to make sure that after, we do have to sign off, but I want to make sure that if we, that we put everything in the links to the show, so everybody has access to your information. And like you said, people can contact you and see if they're a fit, if they have issues they want to discuss, see if they're a fit, if they're not. We'll see how you go through things. And I, love your work. So I'm glad I found you. I don't even know how I found you. I listened to a podcast and I went, wait a minute, I want to know about that. So this is awesome. So yeah, I have 1,000,000 more questions in between the lines. We'll get information to everybody in the links to the show here, and get it out. So thank you so much. Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Stuff. Okay, thanks for sticking with thanks for sticking with it and getting on. That was awesome. So thanks everybody for coming on. Interesting discussion. Just like all the folks of you on that know energetics, there's a different way to look at life now and how our body works. And I'm actually fascinated. I'm actually have high hopes for healthcare in the future.
Yeah.
So we just have to kind of get over the edge, but it's getting there. So it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks everybody for chiming on, sticking in with the start of the show. Glad you came in, and we'll put more information in the links. And stay nourished, everybody. And yeah, happy heart health to everyone as well.
That's
Thanks.
right.
Okay. Bye bye.